There was a time when the gods directly influenced the world, and people believed that every natural force carried their will. Among those who ruled under their gaze was a king named Minos. He was a strong and capable ruler, but he wanted more than just power. He wanted to prove that he was chosen by the gods themselves. To do this, he turned to Poseidon and asked for a sign that would confirm his right to rule. Poseidon answered his prayer. From the depths of the sea emerged a magnificent white bull, unlike any creature seen before. Its appearance was divine, and it was clear that this was not just a gift, but a test. Minos understood that he was meant to sacrifice the bull to honor the god who had sent it. This act would show his loyalty and obedience. However, when Minos looked at the bull, he hesitated. The animal was too perfect to destroy. Instead of sacrificing it, he made a decision that would change everything. He kept the divine bull and sacrificed another, hoping that Poseidon would not notice the deception. But the gods always notice. Poseidon was angered by Minos's disobedience, and instead of punishing him directly, he chose a far more disturbing form of revenge. He cursed Minos's wife, Pasipha. First, nothing seemed unusual. Life continued as normal, and no one suspected that anything had changed. But gradually, Pasipha began to feel something strange. It started as a thought she could not control, then a feeling that grew stronger over time. She found herself drawn toward the bull in a way that made no sense and frightened her. She tried to resist, but the feeling only intensified. It was not love or desire, it was something unnatural, something forced upon her by a divine curse. Her thoughts became consumed by it, and she could not escape. Minos did not understand what was happening, and neither did anyone else. The curse worked in silence, slowly changing everything. What began as a hidden punishment would soon lead to consequences far beyond anything the king could have imagined, and deep beneath the palace of Crete, events were already moving towards something terrible. The gods had made their decision, and the cost of Minos's choice had only just begun. The curse placed upon Pasipha did not fade. Instead, it grew stronger with each passing day. What began as a strange and disturbing feeling soon became something she could no longer control. Her thoughts were no longer her own, and the will of Poseidon guided her actions in ways she did not understand. Desperate and ashamed, Pasipha hid her condition from the world. She knew that what she felt was unnatural, something that should not exist. But curses from the gods cannot be resisted forever. Eventually, her desperation led her to seek help from the only person capable of creating the impossible, Daedalus. Daedalus was known for his genius, a master craftsman whose creations seemed almost magical. When Pasipha came to him with her request, he understood that this was no ordinary task. He also understood that refusing the queen could cost him his life. So he agreed. Using his skill, Daedalus constructed a lifelike wooden structure designed to deceive the bull. It was a creation born not from inspiration, but from fear and necessity. Through this unnatural invention, the curse of the gods took its final form. What followed should have never happened. It was not an act of will, but the result of divine punishment. And from that act, something began to grow, something that did not belong in the world of humans or gods. Time passed, and soon the consequences of the curse could no longer be hidden. Pasipha gave birth to a creature unlike anything ever seen before. It had the body of a human, but the head of a bull. It was neither one nor the other, but something in between. This was the Minotaur. When Minos saw the creature, he was horrified. This was the result of his decision, the price of his deception. The divine punishment had taken a form that could not be ignored or undone. The child grew quickly, and with its growth came a dangerous strength. It did not think like a human, nor did it behave like an animal. It was unpredictable, driven by instincts no one could control. The palace could not contain it, and its presence became a threat to everyone around it. Minos knew he had to hide the creature, not only to protect his kingdom, but to hide his own shame. He could not allow the world to see what his actions had created. So once again, he turned to Daedalus. This time, he gave him a different task. Not to create something beautiful, but to build a prison, a place from which no one could escape. A structure so complex that it would confuse even the sharpest mind. Deep beneath the palace, Daedalus built the Labyrinth, a vast maze of stone corridors that twisted endlessly in every direction. It was not just a prison, it was a trap, and when it was finished, the Minotaur was placed inside, left alone in the darkness, hidden from the world, forgotten by everyone, except the gods who had created him. The labyrinth built by Daedalus was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was not just a maze, but a carefully designed prison where every corridor led to confusion, and every turn could mean being lost forever. Once inside, there was no clear path, no escape, and no hope of finding the way back. At the center of this endless structure lived the Minotaur. Hidden from the world, cut off from everything, the creature grew in darkness. With time, isolation changed it. Whatever humanity it might have had was slowly replaced by instinct. It became more aggressive, more dangerous, and impossible to control. Meanwhile, Minos continued to rule, but his actions had consequences beyond the labyrinth. After a conflict with Athens, he imposed a cruel punishment on the city. As a sign of submission, the Athenians were forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete every year. These victims were not meant to survive. They were sent into the labyrinth as sacrifices. Each time, the result was the same. The young people would enter together, trying to stay calm, trying to find a way out. But the deeper they went, the more the maze separated them. Fear would grow, panic would spread, and one by one, they would disappear into the darkness. Some would try to run, others would try to hide, but none of it mattered, because the Minotaur was always there. It knew the labyrinth better than anyone. It moved through the corridors with ease, guided by instinct. And when it found its victims, there was no escape. Over time, the story of the labyrinth spread across Greece. It became a symbol of fear, a place from which no one returned. The Minotaur was no longer just a hidden creature. It had become a legend, a monster that lived in darkness and fed on those sent to die. In Athens, people lived in constant fear of the tribute. Families dreaded the day when the names would be chosen. It was not just a punishment, but a reminder of their defeat and their helplessness. But not everyone was willing to accept this fate. Among the people of Athens, there was one who refused to let the cycle continue. His name was Theseus, and he was about to change everything. When the time came once again for Athens to send its tribute, Theseus stepped forward. He was not chosen by chance, and he did not go in fear. He volunteered. He had heard the stories about the labyrinth and the Minotaur, and he refused to accept that people had to keep dying for the mistakes of others. He made a decision to end it. When Theseus arrived in Crete with the other victims, he stood out immediately. He was calm, focused, and determined in a way that the others were not. Word of his presence spread quickly, and it reached the ears of Ariadne. Ariadne was the daughter of Minos, and she had lived her entire life knowing about the labyrinth and what was hidden inside it. She had seen the fear it caused and understood the cruelty behind it. When she saw Theseus, she realized that he was different from the others who had been sent before. For the first time, she believed that the Minotaur could be defeated, but defeating the creature was only part of the problem. The labyrinth itself was just as dangerous. No one who entered it had ever found their way back out. So Ariadne decided to help him. She approached Theseus in secret and offered him a solution. It was simple, but it could mean the difference between life and death. She gave him a thread and told him to tie one end at the entrance of the labyrinth and carry the rest with him as he moved forward. If he survived, he would be able to follow the thread back and escape. Theseus accepted her help. He knew that without it, even if he defeated the Minotaur, he would still be trapped. Soon after, the time came. The entrance to the labyrinth stood before them, dark and silent. One by one, the chosen victims were sent inside. When it was his turn, Theseus stepped forward without hesitation. He tied the thread at the entrance, took a breath, and walked into the darkness. The air inside was cold and still. The corridors stretched in every direction, twisting and turning in ways that made it impossible to understand where he was going. The deeper he went, the quieter it became. The outside world disappeared, replaced by stone walls and endless shadows. He followed no path, only instinct, unrolling the thread behind him as he moved. Time seemed to lose meaning inside the labyrinth. Every step felt the same, every corridor identical. Then, at some point, he heard it. A sound that did not belong to the maze. Heavy breathing, slow, animal. Theseus stopped. For a moment, everything was silent again. Then the sound came closer. He was no longer alone. Somewhere in the darkness, the Minotaur was moving toward him, and the moment they would meet was now inevitable. The sound grew louder with each passing second. Theseus stood still, focusing on it, trying to understand where it was coming from. The labyrinth no longer felt empty. It felt alive, as if the walls themselves were watching. Then, out of the darkness, it appeared. The Minotaur. It was larger than any man. Its body powerful and tense, its head that of a bull, its eyes filled with something wild and unreadable. It was not just a creature. It was the result of a curse, of a mistake that had been buried in darkness for too long. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the Minotaur charged. The force of it shook the ground. Theseus barely managed to move aside, feeling the air shift as the creature passed him. There was no time to think, no time to hesitate. This was not a battle of strategy, but of survival. The Minotaur attacked again, faster this time. Theseus reacted, using his speed to avoid the direct impact. He understood quickly that he could not match the creature's strength. If he tried, he would lose. So he waited for an opening. The labyrinth echoed with the sounds of movement, footsteps, and heavy breathing. Each attack brought the Minotaur closer, but also more reckless. It relied on force, on instinct, on rage, and that was its weakness. At the right moment, Theseus struck. The fight did not last long, but it felt endless. Step by step, he gained the advantage, avoiding direct hits and waiting for the creature to expose itself. And finally, it did. With one final movement, the battle ended. The Minotaur fell. Silence filled the labyrinth. For the first time in years, there was no movement in its corridors. No sound of footsteps, no presence in the shadows. The creature that had lived in darkness for so long was gone. Theseus stood there for a moment, catching his breath. The danger was over, but he was still deep inside the labyrinth. Then he remembered the thread. He found it on the ground and began to follow it back, step by step, retracing his path through the maze. This time, the corridors felt different, not less confusing, but less threatening. The presence that had filled them was no longer there. Eventually, he saw light, the exit. Theseus stepped out of the labyrinth, returning to the world above. The nightmare that had taken so many lives had finally ended. With the Minotaur gone, the cycle of sacrifice was broken. Athens would no longer have to send its people to die, and the labyrinth lost its purpose. But the story did not end as a simple victory, because the Minotaur was never just a monster. It was the result of a choice, a consequence of pride, disobedience, and the will of the gods. And in the end, it was a reminder that some tragedies are not born from evil, but from the mistakes that create it.